This ad space on Jacob V Weekly is being donated to the Caddy Shack. Stay tuned till the end of the episode to find out more.
Well, describe what your show is. What you are regular dudes.
What are you doing? What are you doing right now? You're doing great. How are those levels looking?
Mine's a nice thin straight line.
Yeah, video's still rolling?
Video's rolling.
So Jacob V Weekly is just a weekly kind of, maybe weekly, maybe even more, maybe a little bit less, but it's sort of just a platform for me to kind of reflect on this crazy world we live in, because my contact with the world is greatly inhibited right now. So the show's not about COVID. Today's episode is a little bit, but because that's the world we live in now. And so today we talk a lot about kind of just some things that we've noticed, some of our experiences, who we are as people, and so some of the stuff that we'll be talking about, but really just kind of the reason why start a podcast now, why in 2020 when there's a billion other ones. And I kind of have all this impulse to create something, but music stuff is just kind of on hold right now. And we're getting back sucked into this again. We talked about this already, but it's going to be kind of a place for everything. It's going to be a place to reflect on things that I think are funny, or that I think you'll think are funny. It's going to be a place where, we used to do relationship advice on my old radio show when I was in college. If I can, elicit some emails from anybody to address some of those things, that's always fun. That was one of my favorite things we ever did. It was a little too hot for college radio. It was a little concerned. And I thought, my friend Joe here, I thought you'd be perfect to kind of help me through this. You're younger than me. You're full of enthusiasm. You follow directions really well. And if I think of something like a really dirty joke, you're going to get kind of uncomfortable in the way that's going to be nice. So, I'm just kind of hoping for that prayers and blessings and sparkles.
Yeah, and I think you should I think you should also talk about why, I think your voice is important, because I think you're going to talk about things that,
that's another thing we kind of alluded to in our raw conversation earlier. That's going to make up the bulk of this episode, right? Yeah. Is that I've gotten to see kind of a lot of different aspects of what at least the world is like here locally in our town of St. Louis, which represents a lot of different places in the world that we live in, that some of these issues that real people kind of are experiencing, right? And right now, I love podcasts, but a lot of podcasters are successful in a way that kind of removes them from that relativity, right? It's hard to relate to a bunch of people who have housekeepers and Teslas and things like that. So that's part of the struggle as well. Mostly with the Tesla, it's that I'm jealous. As soon as my wife lets me get one, you better believe, I don't care if it's old, I'll get an '01, honey.
Totaled.
But it was just one, it's a great excuse for me to just have a weekly conversation with people that I want to catch up with. I've also, kind of given up alcohol since COVID started, because it's just been, what am I going to sit around my house and get blackout drunk by myself? Yeah. It just feels gross. And it's been great for my health. I feel wonderful, right? But also, I used to be able to catch up with people on a happy hour or something. And, I'm not wearing a mask into a Mexican restaurant on a Tuesday to talk about your baby that you're going to leave early to go see. That's not the goal either. So I need it as a way to communicate with different people. And, and I think if it's a platform that we can kind of draw some any attention to at all, then there's going to be artists that I want to talk to and promote. There's going to be entrepreneurs and business people that I want to talk to and promote. There's going to be professionals of all sorts that will talk about the issues that they're seeing in their field. A lot of that's going to be related to my experience in education. We're going to talk about that for sure. And then musically, we'll talk about some great, awesome stuff musically, and we'll talk about some challenges, especially kind of at the local music level, because that's where I've allowed the bulk of my experience to be. So you don't need a reason
Well, I think it's also, it's very valuable because I think you have your a hand in so many relevant things. Like you have a hand in
I'm an
art.
epidemiologist.
Yeah.
We're going to solve this whole COVID thing right here.
Well, but you're a teacher, and so you have. I mean, being
We're
a
bringing
teacher
back cockfighting. You've been hearing all all these
These
ads for these
rumblings.
betting apps. Next thing we're warming up to cockfighting. We're bringing back roosters in the streets. I want to see blood on the pavement, honey.
cock mo. Yeah,
We should really copyright that
yeah.
before it launches, because as soon, if Parsons gets reelected, we could get cockfighting in the
could.
next 4 years. We could.
Most things.
What
are
would we
possible.
call it? Would Cockmo be the name of the bill, or that's the name of the app that we use for the
That's
betting?
It's the betting app. It's
the betting app. You heard it here first.
It'll be hijacked. By
Is this count as copyright for? Can we copyright just saying that we talked about it
Absolutely, it's in writing.
on the first episode of our podcast that
That is, it's gonna go.
that I'm funding
go
with my
nationwide.
Spotify earnings? Spotify owes me 79 cents, by the way.
It's the only plug you've done this whole show.
Is for
Spotify and Cockmo.
yeah, I was gonna say, if you mean for the app that we're inventing right now.
Yeah.
Okay, so we really got to talk to some people about getting this. We got to call my friend, who I'm not gonna, my lawyer friend,
yeah.
who about copywriting, and then what kind of, I mean, seriously, how expensive is it going to be to get? What could we call it? We can't call it cockfighting in the law.
No.
We would call it poultry something.
Oh, right. In the writing, you're saying that we have to use language that is sensitive.
Do we want to call it combat? What do they call horse racing? That's where we're going to start. We're going to look into horse racing. We're going to figure out exactly why is that legal.
Right.
And then we're going to figure out how to apply that back to roosters, because I can beef up a fighting cock, dude.
Yeah. You've got the space.
I got oh my god, I got the perfect backyard. I have plenty of garbage and food for it to eat. We could pump it full of hormones. This is going to be unregulated. The only
And
part
how
is
is it? And how is it any more unethical than the regular poultry food industry?
here's the thing. It's not like dog fighting. Sometimes the dogs don't want to fight. Those cocks want to fight.
Yeah, that's. Yeah, I mean they have a
Jesus Christ. A genetic predisposition
It's predisposition towards.
towards violent behavior towards other cocks.
Yes, the animal has violent predispositions. Yep, towards other cocks.
This is going to be really good. Welcome to
get that
Jacob
right.
V Weekly. We're going to ramble about what we're going to do, and then we're going to start doing some of it. I think a great place to start is just kind of the question you kept asking already, which was, what do you want to talk about? So, you know me as a musician mostly, and that's how I like to introduce myself to people, right? And then other people know me as an educator, right? As a teacher, I taught English for 6 years or whatever, and I've been in coaching since then, and so I'm still very much in both kind of worlds. But then with COVID, I would normally have these kind of conversations, I think, with people in the real world at places, but then lately haven't been able to do that. It's been just a completely different world since the shutdown started. I mean, I used to be gigging 2 or 3 days a week and just being in the community with downtime to talk to different people about different issues and stuff. And then, I was also, like we talked about, I worked in radio in college. That's how we met our mutual friend Adam. And I always considered that as a career, but I kind of it seemed like really sports and news heavy, and neither of those were my niche. And then, what's the career path really that looks sustainable in radio in the 21st century? Didn't really, so it wasn't something I pursued further. And you and me have always talked about the idea of maybe doing stand up, and we've talked about writing some, and I've written some, but now it's like I'm not going to be going to open mics in a pandemic to work on 5 minutes of stand up material. So, and podcasts I really like. I do really like, since COVID started, really my main form of entertainment. Can you hit Y on the keyboard? And what happened? Yeah, good. So once quarantine started, really, I completely abandoned anything I had left resembling TV, right? I don't have, certainly not cable, and I don't even really pipe in network TV like for the news or anything even. I really only have streaming platforms. And so I was pretty much only on YouTube and other kinds of digital content anyway, as far as my own entertainment was concerned. And then since quarantine, it's mostly been, if I'm not playing music or gaming, I'm just listening to a podcast, or I'm listening to a podcast while I'm doing those other things, right? So, but it's just such a weird thing. Now it seems like, oh, it's such a big deal and people act like it's up and coming, but podcasts have been around for a long, long time. It just used to be a weird app in your phone. It was just like, what are those? It's kind of like the radio, but it's not. And I used to listen to some that were really like underground and like independent, like pioneering the kind of format. And lately, like the podcasts that are people are always talking about, because I guess they're making money or something, are all like this one group of like middle-age LA comedians, or there's some New York kind of comedian podcast kind of groups, I guess, or whatever. But it's like those people are really, really funny and really, really smart. And they've really invented this platform that a lot of people can kind of access and do with whatever. There's podcasts about everything. I have a podcast I listen to that's in Spanish. I don't even speak Spanish, but I enjoy the conversation and the energy. And so similar, the reason I never did stand-up comedy before now is I kind of hated some of the vibes I got from people I met in that quote-unquote scene or whatever. They seem really stressed out and really, well, and they can come across kind of, because I think they're stressed out. I think they're stressed out by trying to hone their craft in a really unnatural environment. We don't have tons of comedy clubs here. They don't have open mics every night or whatever. So, you know, you're at Venice Cafe, which I love, or whatever, and there's a guy playing metal guitar along to his iPod, and then there's two stand-up comedians, and they're really serious, really focused on trying to learn what they're, you know, working on, and whatever, and it's just random. It's just so random. So, and now, you know, all the big LA podcasters who were, you know, the sort of icons, they're all either moving or they're getting canceled for being sex monsters, or whatever. So it's like, well, wait a minute. They don't own this platform just because they sold a lot of Manscaped trimmers or something. You know what I mean? It's kind of crazy, like how formulaic it all is. And so much of the money being made in podcasts is across these dozen shows that are so similar and have such a similar thing. And some of them are funnier than others, and some of them are really, really great. But it's also like, when I have all this energy in this conversation that I need to figure out a place to put, because now I'm not out in the community, you know, 3 nights a week, and then, you know, out in what went green?
Yeah. The tracks. Okay. I think it's still recording.
No, they were always green. It's moving.
Yeah.
And they're like highlighted green looking kind of. Yeah. No, you're good. So I don't know. And I started kicking around the idea of doing this when I was like right after quarantine started. So we're talking like March of this year, 2020, that I was listening to a specific podcast. They were talking about how they all just got tested right before they were filming, and they could afford to get tested every day if they want to. And then they're all talking about their Teslas and their $5,000 mattresses they got shipped to their house in a box. And I'm just like, this is not actually representative of the kind of life normal people are living. And so those shows can be really funny, but that was when that's your only contact for like 6 months, it starts to be like, oh, it's kind of spoiling the routine. What? Oh, sure. Well, yeah. I mean, it's just like, and they all have housekeepers. Like you'll be listening to I was listening to, I don't want to name names because I don't want to start a podcast complaining about other podcasts, but it's just, I just kind of want to vocalize some of my reluctance to starting one before. But like I was listening to one of my favorite podcasts, these two people talking about how they managed a certain issue in their home or whatever with their spouse, and was like, well, you know, that's gotten a lot better because we have a housekeeper. And then and she was like, how do you guys deal with that? And then the guy was like, we have a housekeeper. And they were talking about like sorting laundry, like something I wouldn't want a stranger to come into my house to do. And then it's an ad for the CBD lozenges and the IV drip and the, you know what I mean?
Well,
You don't have to click that every time.
well, I figured when I'm speaking, at least. I think I know you don't want to name names, but like, if you were to define yourself a part of a group of people in the St. Louis scene, who would those people be?
As well, that's a problem too. Is that I work on a lot of different things, right? So I have this community that I'm a part of during the day of, local kind of mostly public school educators. So, I've taught in a public high school, to public junior high, and a charter school, and I see a lot of familiar faces doing that. And then also as, a recording artist and a performing kind of musician of my original stuff, I mostly play at a couple of different of the same bars here in town, and I see the same people there, and I like to book shows with my friends' bands, and sometimes the same bands repeatedly. I like to make an evening of it. So there's kind of one group of people I know from there. But since, and then there's another, network of musicians I know from other types of things, from playing at casinos and weird cover gigs and stuff like that. Then a lot of those people are in the church music scene, and I used to work in music stores, and so I know a lot of people through there. So really, most of my socialization is from the music scene. That's how I introduce myself.
Well, incidentally,
normally.
Well, incidentally, a lot of the people in the St. Louis music scene are also teachers.
That happens a lot because they have time,
Yeah.
To practice and whatnot. I know a lot of teachers that are in. I worked with a guy from a very, very popular local band for a couple of years, and that's a funny overlay. Also,
You don't want to name the bands or anything. You don't want to name names.
maybe later. I don't know. You know what I mean? And so. What do we want to talk about? That's kind of the recurring thing. So you and I met playing music together, but we have a lot of other similar interests, right? We have similar interests in music and in, of course, stuff that goes along with electric guitar gear and gadgetry and audio production and stuff like that. But also, it's very similar interests in terms of comedy. You worked at a comedy club for a minute, just sort of be adjacent to that world and kind of see what that looked like here. I mean, at least here in town. You know what I mean? And I'm sure we'll talk about that at some point. But it's also like I'm not going to start. That's not my first move after COVID, is to start a new hobby, and it requires people to all be in the same room together, laughing and breathing and drinking and eating chicken.
Yeah. It's I mean, it's almost like 9/11. I mean, it's like,
well, you know
so
what?
many
It's
people are not
crazy.
ready.
Yeah, it's so crazy how profound the change is. You know what I mean? Like things that even we were doing in March before the shutdown, like going to, you could go stand outside of some of my favorite bars here, and there's strangers passing around joints and sharing cigarettes and beers and stuff. I'm like, and that's done, at least for me. I'm not, you know what I mean? I'm not necessarily into swapping mouth particles with strangers. And so like that's a profound difference from, and
New normal.
yeah, the new normal. Yeah.
It's unfortunate. But it's like, yeah.
Well, and it's just crazy how abrupt and how sudden and how profound it was.
Yeah. And completely changed, the art forms, and especially when it came to film. And I mean, like recording artists are back to being recording artists. And then,
Well, and that's the other thing. Is I really wanted to, of course, when this started, I said, you know what, this will be a great time. I just bought this house at the end of last year, so I just squeaked this in. I was just getting all this set up. We're in my home studio, Beat Lab sort of thing here. And I thought, quarantine will be a great opportunity for that to get started. And I have everything I need. I can do my own record. And it's like every summer, too. As a teacher, I have the summers off, right? I usually get 10 weeks in the summer where school's not in session. So every year I'm like, oh God, I'm finally going to do a record. I'm going to play all the instruments myself. I don't have to schedule anything with anybody, and it never happens. And it certainly doesn't happen when the world seems to be in peril and we're in this psychotic election cycle, and just the climate and culture is not like I have all this positive energy where I just want to create music that I like. I come down here and I play a lot of guitar, right? As a self-soothing kind of reflective impulse. But if I'm not really playing with people, it's not really happening. And I can't necessarily bring big groups of people over here who all work in different environments and live in different, I call it ecosystems. My mom laughs at me when I say that, but it's really what it is. But it's the best way to describe it is, they're all exposed to different levels of the public in different ways in different areas. And I can't bring all those people into my house right now, until we know more about this situation, and so I was hoping that by now I'd be promoting a new album or EP or a new project, musically or something, in that nature. Speak of the devil, my mom was calling me. But it just wasn't happening. I come down here and play for a bit and set up some stuff, and I've created some really great loops, some really great instrumental parts with, fake drums and stuff on them that sound really cool and be a really great start to an idea. But I haven't played with my band at all. That I do my original stuff with, and that's kind of the so that's kind of a dead end right now. So I kind of need to wait until that opens up, and I've gotten to do some cover stuff here and there. I'm kind of waiting until we figure out exactly where we stand with safety to see if I'd love to collaborate with some other musicians and do some other work, but that's just not really what's happening right now. So when the idea came up of I always wanted to do radio and I really enjoyed it. And then I've always been really comfortable on a microphone. I've always really loved the format of podcasts, even from their early days. I used to listen to Johnny McGovern and people like that back when podcasts didn't even really make money. And that's not the goal of this one either. I think that's the other thing. There's people I went to high school with that are having a delayed quarter-life crisis that they're like, oh, I'm going to start a YouTube channel. I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to do, X, Y, Z. And it's just like a lot of how many podcasts are going to be self-sustainable to the point where, a guy in a suburb of a Midwestern city can kind of pay his bills just doing a podcast that he just started in 2020. You know what I mean? So that's certainly not my goal here. This is more of, it's also, I'd love to have this as a different part of my week than therapy. I have therapy every other week where we talk about a lot of these same things that, that I experience, and we'll get into, sort of the hellscape we live in at some point. But yeah, I just don't have the expectation like, oh, you know what? Me and my buddy Joe are going to start a podcast about football so we can make a bunch of money. Like, that's not the goal. The goal is, chicken wings. It'd be great if we could get a sponsorship from, we had some lovely chicken on the way in, but we're not going to name drop them unless they pay us to, or unless they see my cup at some point. But yeah, so it's certainly not a financial endeavor. It's not, which is how my music has always been. I've made a little bit of money off of it. Here or there, usually the week you release something, you get enough streams or downloads, or sometimes if you're really lucky, paid downloads, bro. Somebody will pay $5 for a record on Bandcamp or something. So, but that's the thing is you can, terrestrial radio, you have to make enough money to sustain the platform in order to be on air to do what you want to do. Whereas podcasts, you can be on air as much as you want. You give your $9 to your aggregator, and if you're not selling ad space, you're just not making money. But that's not really why we're here. I did a radio show 2 hours a week, every week, at least once for 2 years, and loved it. Now we played music, so that's it was easier to fill 2 hours. Maybe it was 3 hours. 2 hours sounds more appropriate.
Original material?
No. No. But it was like a rock show. It was like a an afternoon drive time kind of on the radio, right? But it was internet radio, and it was piped into campus. So it was, there were some times where it was really kind of sketchy to know who's really even paying attention right now. And there was a thing where you could check, and I'm like, let's not check. Why get in our own heads about it? So this is like a place where I can kind of have these weekly check-ins with just like the world and kind of talk through. That's a big part of it, is I need to talk through things that I discover. I think sometimes you've seen me driving around in my car and I'll send you a Snapchat of just like making a really profound point about something that we were not even talking about. So I'm like, I need an audience for this. So I don't know. I just kind of want to explore the.
Please, that tube sag.
Yeah. Oh my God. It was power amp. It was like power transformer. Ghosting, like yeah, sag, like from. That's a great point. Oh my God, that really happened. That was a real conversation we had. So I think we were. I was driving down Kings Highway, and I was just thinking about the difference between like a toroidal power transformer and like an old school like wound like big old honking thing, which is not even necessarily something we'll cover.
It started by you were just like you didn't there was no context. You just
Yeah.
sent it. And then I was like, oh, now I know that. Now we've
Just so you know, yeah, and I needed somebody to know that. So now you're gonna have to do that weekly. You're gonna have to do that. It's probably gonna be roughly an hour.
Well, yeah, and what are you ever gonna get back out and see shows in the next year and a half?
Oh, I mean, it depends on when and where and how. I've been to a couple of different outdoor things. I've played a couple. I played a barbecue thing at a farm a couple weeks ago that was totally random, but there were people there. We were outside. We had plenty of space. I also played the opening of a giant patio at this bar out in rural kind of Missouri, great middle land kind of thing, but it was plenty of space. It was a beautiful, warm, sunny day. So, now being invited to go out and just attend something like that's the thing I don't know.
Well, I think that'd be a pretty good thing because these people, especially the local band members, people who are in bands and original bands, like, they love when third party people talk about them.
Yeah.
And so, talking about when you describe, there's nothing wrong with describing an evening going out and saying, well, yeah, and then, I don't know any local bands. Then Sleepy Kitty was there, and, we saw that.
That'd be really lit.
Yeah. If you were going out and they were hanging out.
If you were just, like, going to get a sandwich and there was just Sleepy Kitty. But that's the thing, is, like, is the main thing is, like, some of my favorite events are like that, where, like, Lo-Fi Cherokee, for example, where they're shooting performances in all these different spaces in a short amount of time or whatever. It's like, so you can literally walk into a dress shop and see a band playing, or you walk into buy some lunch somewhere and there's somebody setting up for recording one of those things. Like, that's one of those events where that's fun, and that's just not possible right now. And like, it started like when I was first old enough to kind of get into shows and stuff on my own. I would go to stuff by myself, and just because I wanted to be a part of it. I was, writing songs and playing guitar, and I wanted to be able to do that out in the world where that existed. So I would go to like random like crawfish boils and anything where it was just a random event, where a record store day that would always get crazy, where there'd be kegs of random beer and just buckets of Pabst Blue Ribbon and people throwing frisbees, and then it's like a block party in front of the CD store for some reason. So that was kind of, I definitely prefer that, and that's part of what kind of scares me about. That's the level that's going to suffer. The small stuff is what's going to suffer. Like, they're going to figure out a way to see Imagine Dragons at Chaffetz or something, if that's what they want to do, because they can afford to make that business of Imagine Dragons work. For example, the one thing I name drop, we're going to name drop it multiple. Now we hate them, but that's the thing, is that they're going to figure out a way to make that work. The people that are going to suffer are going to be local artists, emerging artists, but there's also things that are going to be really cool. There's going to be things that are going to be really cool with the ways that people are still going to try to exercise that creative energy. For example, we should have like a header or like a drop that points out when it's going to be guitar nerd moments. I don't think we're going to add one yet, but for example, I'm sure we're going to end up talking about guitar stuff at some point on a regular basis. I was totally off of amps for a long time. I was going DI and doing the whole cab sim thing because I didn't want to carry a big amp around. Well, now I don't have to worry about that. So I have the biggest amp rig I've ever had of this massive 412 speaker cabinet and 2 different heads so I can run them in stereo. Like, that's different. And so my recordings are going to benefit from having those tonal options. And so I'm hoping that people expand the ways that they're learning how to make and record music at home, because I've been in a recording studio to work since this has happened, since we've been shut down, and it's uncomfortable. I feel bad using the bathroom at some place that's not my home, because I just like, well, somebody's either got to worry about sanitizing this or they're not, and then that grosses me out. You know what I mean? Like, any kind of a small business arrangement surrounding music is really going to take a hit. And that's a bummer, because that's kind of my favorite place. I chose to have a day job so that I could pursue music artistically and not necessarily pursue it commercially. So I would love to benefit from it more commercially, but the attraction has really been, I can pay the bills and buy cool music stuff on occasion so that I can live that free of the commerce part. So I don't necessarily. I've never made tons of money playing music locally, so I'm not worried about that. But I do worry just about that economy of just the scene, because there's got to be a little bit of money in it for it to exist. The bars have to make enough money to keep doing what they're doing, and so they can host those situations at least.
Corporate culture, is going to sustain, and then but they completely.
That's the thing.
Yeah,
it's all going to be holograms of Imagine Dragons at Joe's Crab Shack. That's going to be the world we live in.
They've neutered the community, the culture.
Well, and it's not even they, like I'm even assigning blame, but it's just the situation we're in, whether we should be in it or not, is that's the scene that's going to suffer. And so that's the thing where I'm like, some of my heroes locally also have a podcast on the side. And because a podcast is not a job right now, we call this show Jacob V Weekly. It may come out a couple times a week. Sometimes we may skip a week, especially if it ever becomes a situation where, we're scheduling ads for whatever reason. That would be something that we would entertain, is doing it on varying frequencies, right? But right now I'd like to do them when we need to do them. You know what I mean? Because I used to be able to go to my favorite bar here in St. Louis, the Heavy Anchor, and I used to, even if there wasn't a show, I'd see people that I play shows with there, or that are there for shows, and we could go on the patio and we could catch up, but we could just talk about something that happened in the news that day. Somebody comes out and lights a cigarette and said, guys, can you believe what happened with blah, blah, blah? It could be local. It could not be local. I've been there when local historical moments have happened, protests and things like that. Like, that's been one of the places where, I remember being there when, XYZ happened. So that's one of those places that I'm like, I think the community is able to support them, to keep them open as far as, and because it's a small enough operation. But I worry about at what point can we do shows again in there? I mean, you've been to see me there before, and, we can get a couple dozen people in that room and it starts to fill up and get a little warm, and you can start to smell people's breath. Do I want to experience that right now? That's hard. You know what I mean? And would we be allowed to, and is that even safe? That's the thing, is that we're not even talking about like it has to be like I wish we could just go do that. Like, I really feel unsafe being in a group of strangers just because that's how they made you feel. It's just like you were saying, like after 9/11 we were all of a sudden afraid of airplanes, or we were xenophobic like we had never been before. And it happened like that. You know what I mean? It was so crazy how quickly that kind of transition happened. And so that's really hard, because like the night before when shutdown happened, I played March 13th at the casino with the cover band, and we went out that night, and I was driving the drummer home, and I took him to go score some blow, I think, somewhere. And then, we went to go meet up with some friends of mine somewhere, and they were all sneaking off to go snort coke, which, I'm not a coke snorter, so I hang back or whatever, but just like thinking like, oh yeah, they're saying everything's closing on Monday. Like, you can't get COVID before Monday, but Monday everything's closing. So looking around, and it was still kind of chilly out. We still had jackets on or whatever. And so thinking like that's how long ago it was that it was kind of the last time we were really out and kind of not really worried about it.
Approaching a year. year.
since it broke out in China originally or whatever. Yeah. And that's another thing. This is a podcast that's not even necessarily about COVID, but how could it not be? That's what's really hard. I have some podcasts I listen to that I really love, and I love them in spite of all these other podcasts that are kind of annoying or redundant or whatever. You know, when I was looking up names for to name this podcast, I always kind of wanted to name it Jacob V Weekly, but
B-Weekly.
yeah. You know, of course,
more
I looked into the V-Cast or V-Pod, you know what I mean, or terrible things like that, and it was, you know, but
Ends up being a feminist podcast.
yeah, well, and that's the thing too, is like I can merge it with my music branding or whatever, but and because it's coming from the same space, you know what I mean? And one of my favorite local bands is called Crystal Lady. They have a podcast together that they do occasionally as a band, which I think it's not even necessarily about them as much as it's just that's a thing that they do together. It's a part of their collaboration. And you know what? We'll probably have some guests. You know what I mean? There's some people I'd love to get on here, some local artists, and really talk about, you know, how are we gonna survive artistically, much less financially or even medically, right? But so you know, I want to have guests and stuff like that. But the real focus is not even about COVID. It's really just about having this outlet to kind of explore some of these ideas. But, you know, I can't listen to even my favorite podcast. They're episodes from before COVID. It's like, it's not relevant to me at all. You know what I mean? Like if I, like my favorite podcast ever, I've run out of episodes because I've listened to them all multiple times and, or they're so far pre-COVID that it's hard to even relate to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's interesting because sometimes it's like I'm listening to them now. And sometimes when COVID or the election comes up, I just immediately I'm just like, duh. Like I'm like, okay. But it's so funny because it's like I'm so in search of bliss that I'm like, let's just act like nothing is happening. Just act like the world doesn't exist, you know? And so I think, yeah, like it's reverse for me. It's like I want to live in a world where it's not happening, but you know, it is what it is. And I think it's important to address that. But I think also, you know, I think you shouldn't veer from just artists for interviewing. I think you should.
Oh no, and well, that's the thing. Is like it's kind of because it's not in a recurring space that has a brand or like an expectation. You know what I mean? Like if you're on a radio station, you have to kind of be a part of that mechanism and those advertisers and their target audiences. Whereas, you know, even if nobody listens to much of this, that's not really the goal. The goal is to kind of have those conversations, and it just makes more sense to do that in this kind of digital platform as opposed to I used to just catch up with those people at their shows or at their businesses or whatever. You know what I mean? I'd love to have some of our local entrepreneur friends on. I mean, not just to talk about their businesses, but also their businesses now. You know what I mean? And their plans now. Because some businesses are adapting really successfully and some are not. You know what I mean? But like, yeah, I kind of definitely want it to be about anything and everything. I mean, just anything that comes up, anything that seems important. You know, it's not going to be a political show, but I'm sure we're going to get upset about politics at some point. I'd guess probably in the next couple of weeks, right? It's probably going to get a little dicey. Yeah. You know, we are in my dad cave bunker situation, so you know we could get a little paranoid. You know what I mean? We could be a little conspiratorial. You know, it could happen.
Well, I think you should recognize, like, you know, you were talking about how when you're younger, you'd go out by yourself and go to the shows, you know, go to a show or go to just be a part of something. But I think now, like, you know, you have to give yourself some credit from my angle. You know, you go to shows now and you really are, even for like, you know, even for the, you know, people that everybody's there to see, you are kind of somebody in the room that people go to, like, you know, even the main act will go to as like, that's the familiar guy that I go and, you know.
Oh, like me personally?
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah. But, you know, I'm a big dude. Apparently I'm closer to 6'3". I thought I was 6'1" this whole time. But I just learned the other day, apparently I'm closer to 6'3". And you know, having kind of, I've had this beard for a long time and I've had hair for a long time. So it's pretty much been 10 or so years of this same kind of look, you know, just kind of ballooned up a little bit, but it's kind of all the same package. So that also happens. I'm surprised though, because I mean, I've gotten kicked out of Dalmar Hall and the pageant both several times, sometimes with you even there. And they always let me back in. I don't get it. They always give me another shot. They've been so nice. They were even nice that last time I got thrown out of that Raconteur show, and I was an absolute mess. That was absolutely ridiculous.
It's more of like you're kind of a mascot of the.
That's the thing. That's what I always wanted to be. I want to be a symbol for the people and of the people.
The one we needed, not necessarily
the one, not the. Maybe it's the one we deserve.
That's yes.
The. Did you just call me a mascot?
No, I'm sorry.